Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we're ignoring all the good advice. We're going down the spooky road they say not to come down. We are going up the stairs when all common sense says go out the front door. We are taking a break from all the capes and the spectacle to talk about one of our favorite genres here at the Cinematropolis, which is horror. More specifically, we're going to talk about a few of the biggest summer horror films of 2026. Obsession, little movie, you might have heard of it. Backrooms. We're also going to talk about Leviticus. And last but certainly not least, we're going to talk about the newest film that is now in theaters, Evil Dead Burn. Now, joining me today, among the biggest horror hounds I know, he is the one who's keeping me up to speed on all the good horror bits. That is my co-host and award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker, LaRon Chapman. LaRon, welcome back, sir.
So there's only 2 seasons of the year that I care about, and that is, horror season and Oscar season. And they sometimes typically pretty much converge in around fall time.
LaRon, you got lucky this year. You didn't even have to wait for the fall, man. This summer, they're just dropping them like every month, twice a month. It's like, wow, great horror picks.
The summer of horror. Yeah, for
seriously.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, we're very excited to be rejoined by a very special guest. He is both LaRon and I's one of our favorite horror writers on the internet. You probably know his work from, let me just name a few. We've got IGN/Film Fangoria, Bloody Disgusting. He's also a co-founder of Certified Forgotten, Matt Donato. Matt, welcome back, sir.
Thanks so much for having me back, and let me talk about horror because I am right there with LaRon, and let's celebrate the horror we've had already because I do feel like every year it is becoming more and more like, yeah, let's spread it out throughout the season. Summer is now like spooky season for how long? It's been a year already.
Seriously, man. And we've got some good stuff coming in the pipeline later in the fall, too. So eager to get into all of it. Though, I thought, it's interesting we're talking about how this summer we've had a lot of great horror. And it had me thinking, a conversation, Matt, we've been having on this show, a common theme this summer has been, well, wouldn't you know it, things that typically are just guaranteed hits, like Star Wars, Mandalorian and Grogu. We did Supergirl on our last episode. Movies that 10 years ago just would have been smash hits at the box office by default, simply because they're related to IP that people like. They are just not resonating very strongly. But what is resonating? Horror. And let me tell you, the kids are showing up in droves about horror. So before we get into discussing any of these films individually, I wanted to just kind of break the ice here. What do you guys make of the huge shift in audience appetite? And I think we can look at the evidence here being films like Obsession and Backrooms, 2 of the films that we're talking about today. And Matt, special guest, we'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back statistically, horror is one of the proven genres that whenever you need to make money, you bet on horror. That's been decades back at this point. I think I wrote about, at this point, almost a decade ago, about how like summer blockbusters are now horror territory with like the It Chapter 1, It Chapter 2 kind of stuff. There's just this deluge of the Conjureverse, I think, movies were testing the summer and things of that nature, because why save all the horror for October and compete with everything when you can kind of, again, take over the summer and do that. So I think the idea there is that horror fans are the first to respect their franchise in a way that is like, they're always going to show up for it. Like we're all horror fans. Like we all keep up to date with the fact that there are now 100+ new release horror movies easy on streamers, in theaters, and it's not that horror fans choose between which ones they want to see. They're going to get to everything eventually. But talking about the box office specifically, you're right. Like the economy ain't what it used to be. We are all penny pinching and we are all trying to save money lots of places. And like that is just the first indicator of I can't go see everything at $25 Los Angeles ticket prices. And I do have to make choices of what do I see first? How do I space it out? So go to Obsession, go to Backrooms. Those are 2 movies that are original concepts. Backrooms obviously has a gigantic creepypasta background and a built-in fan base, but Obsession, festival darling, Curry Barker has his internet fame as well, but unproven outside of Milk and Cereal as a feature filmmaker. So those are 2 films that people showed up to because we haven't gotten anything like that. Those are concepts that we can bet on. And you know what? If I'm going to spend my $25 this week in my allotment for movies, I'm going to spend it on something that I haven't seen before. It's exciting. It's new. Give me that. So I really think that is playing into the mentality of like a lot of moviegoers, and where, again, horror is always the safe bet. Horror is always what you can bet on to make money, because that is, again, statistically proven over and over again. We still are in a position now as Americans going to the box office with way less money to spend than we could because of so many godforsaken reasons. That is just it's the reality. We can't see everything, so we do have to start choosing, and originality is always going to be what comes forward when the choice is there.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I mean, especially when you're thinking about, like, let's take Mandalorian and Grogu, for example. I don't know where your head was at with that, Matt, but I'm a lifelong Star Wars fan, and I saw the trailer for that, and I was like, yeah, it doesn't look very good. If I'm gonna pick between doesn't look very good and this is a really cool high concept horror, or hey, Backrooms, I've heard of the creepypasta. The vibes of that trailer look really interesting. I'm definitely going to jump on that train, just because you already know you probably have a safe sense that you're not going to like the other thing. I would suppose. Lauren, what do you make of this?
No, I echo that. I feel like much to what Matt said about, it being kind of a tried and true genre that people show up for. And that's every tier of it. We're talking like even the shitty B movies. There is an audience that intentionally goes to watch that content. And so it's something that you can kind of, trust, that people are going to be there for it. And I think that the surprise here with Backrooms and Obsession is that that there is an appetite for original content, because there's been this ongoing conversation, IP, nostalgia, that sort of thing. And like I said, we're seeing diminishing results of that. There may have been an appetite for that at one point in time, but it seems like audiences are really, really hungry to see something they haven't seen before. And I think that, and we'll get into the quality of both of these movies, but either way, the idea is like the original concepts that they're in, the themes that they're kind of exploring, seems to be what's driving people to this because they haven't seen it before. And I think that that's really exciting. And it's actually, as an independent filmmaker myself, it's exciting to see something that, something in this particular genre, doing really well for a Gen Z crowd, because it also is just a great box office story in general. I'm actually very curious to know at the Golden Globes this year when they do the box office
most popular movie or whatever it's called,
movie award. I'm wondering which one they're going to go with, because we have the Odyssey, and then we had Doomsday in December. But I think the most interesting box office story is definitely Obsession's growth with each successive weekend, and seeing a movie that was made for less than $1 million, now, just over 400 million. So that's like, you just don't see that anymore. I mean, the last time I remember hearing a story like that was like Titanic, maybe, like in 97, like whenever it was a word of mouth thing. It did fine the opening weekend, but then it just, over time, people just kept going to the movies over and over again. So it just, they kept it there for months, because and that's the kind of enthusiasm you want to see, not just, with the box office receipts, but just to see audiences get back out into the theaters and for content like this is really exciting. And I hope, and I don't think they will take the right lesson from the studios. It doesn't mean that we want 15 Backrooms and we want 38 Obsessions. And that's probably what we're going to get. But all the same, like, if there's ever, and I always wonder that, who's in the room in these conversations? Do they have any Gen Z representatives there that are like, hey, maybe we take this concept, you know what I mean? Like, and like, what's the larger thing we can do here? What I'm seeing is that we want more original content. What they see is we need 15 more of the same thing. And so maybe they'll hear this podcast. Who knows?
I mean, but we already have the facts that in the last week alone, 3 new internet-based movies have been greenlit. We know they're going to take the wrong lesson, and they're going to take the lesson of who these are, because like the problem with that is Obsession and Backrooms aren't the first internet-based successful movies we have seen. Like, I mean, Markiplier's Iron Lung is right there this year. Like Stuckman made Shelby Oaks and stuff. But what they're ignoring is that there's a lot of bad examples, and there's a lot of bad filmmakers who were plucked from the, not to be too mean about it, but like House on Eden exists for a reason, and no one's heard of it because it's dog shit. And like, that was 2 influencers who made a movie, and they were given carte blanche because they're influencers. And like, I think we're gonna get a lot of studios are gonna learn some lessons in this process. And yes, they
Yeah.
took the wrong idea
I'm
from it.
thinking also Talk to Me is a good example as well.
Right,
That
the
was
Rocket
also,
guys.
so
Talk to me, and their second one. Why am I blanking on the name of it? But you know, they've made two
Yeah,
movies
yeah.
at this
Bring Her
point.
Back.
So, like,
Bring Her Back.
yeah, bring her back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's no, you're totally right. Like, I'm confident for every 10 pieces of bad, like 10 bad movies, we'll probably get one Talk to Me. But again, it's like, it's not, hey, let's go find these young filmmakers who have a really strong vision and a really strong pitch. It's okay, what's trending? Superheroes are out. In fact, I think one of the headlines this week was that an executive in an interview, an executive said that superheroes was a millennial thing, and we're looking for Gen Z things now. I don't know. I'm not really here to argue whether that's right or wrong, but what I will say is there's definitely a shift in, oh yeah, this is the audience appetite has moved on, or at least the perception from executives that's moved on. I think also the co-writer of the Batman Part 2 said he's getting 10 times as many calls for video game adaptations as he is for superhero adaptations. And I do think with a lot of the sort of like Gen Z focused content, simply because horror films are more affordable to make, and they're lower risk in terms of, hey, I can give this guy $5 million and it might make $50 million. It's just a safer bet from a studio. You're probably going to get a lot of really mid to subpar internet lore movies. I think Matt's a great point. There have been a lot of very bad ones already.
There's also a very generalized idea of the viewers, like viewers' intelligence, if you will. Like, I'm now granted, I do think there's a contingent of viewers that do need to be force fed formulas because they have short attention spans and they don't digest all of it. But I think that that's not unilaterally the case. And I feel like that we should definitely be seeing that there are audiences that do have an appetite, because these are pretty weird movies, you know what I mean? Especially Backrooms. You know what I mean? Like, I would say Backrooms in particular, is not necessarily super mainstream outside of the two A-list actors that they did cast to put in it. So I mean, there's definitely this idea that the audience isn't willing to go into more abstractions or do more. And I think that this is proof that that is not the case, that there is an appetite for that. And there's room in this world for both kinds. This, I guess, how I should say it.
Well, I think that also goes along to our side of the industry as well, like talking about journalism and criticism. And there's so much I see about like the idea is give the people what they want and what they're asking for, but our job should also be giving the viewers what they don't know they want yet and what they don't know that like they would actually enjoy. And I think it bleeds into both ways, because like you're so right about the way that studios approach the audience and the way that they are trying to meet them on their demands when something like an Obsession is made on Curry Barker's time. That's what Curry Barker wants to make, or a Paranormal Activity. Just, I'm going to try this little thing that I want to try. No one knew that's what they wanted, but holy hell did they show up for it and support it. And that becomes the thing. And again, you go back to taking the wrong lessons. And once again, the lesson they're taking from this is, oh, people want exactly what Obsession is, or exactly what Backrooms is, when the lesson is gamble. We should be able to write about everything. We should be able to do everything. And the fact that like I've had websites be like, well, like, why would we write about this movie now when no one's talking about it? And maybe if it gets big on Netflix, then we'll write about it. But the answer is because we can get ahead of it and we can be the ones guiding them and all. Like, that's one of my biggest frustrations about it all. And like the way that I think that our industry, I mean, well, it's all the entertainment industry, but like, journalism reflects the same kind of poor concept as Hollywood executives do and stuff like that. That it's always the frustrating point.
Right. Well, and again, I think similarly though, like if you do get ahead of a movie, say you're able to get you identify a film at a festival, you can get like a really great review or write up about it out ahead of time, and then it catches on later. It rewards the publication with all the SEO traffic, So like, I don't know, it's a little bit of chicken or the egg sometimes. I think if you can go back even to the 70s, I won't elaborate too much because it's been talked about to death on the internet. But like, no one knew they wanted Jaws or Star Wars. Like, and then all of a sudden we had 3 decades of a very specific kind of blockbuster formula. And I love a lot of those movies, but at the same time, there's a lot of really terrible blockbuster movies following those same tropes that we had to kind of sit through. So, hopefully what we can do here on this podcast, and Matt, what you're doing, Certified Forgotten, and all the write-ups, is try to help people kind of sort through the crap out there. And I am hopeful that, we see more risks on younger filmmakers. I do think Curry Barker being, I think, 26, Kane Parsons, the film release, he's now 21. He can now drink today, but when the movie came out, he could not drink legally in the United States. I do think trying to give younger talent their fair chance at doing these pitches with probably like lower stakes bets, $10 million, $20 million. It's a lot less than $200 million. So
yeah, you don't need a bunch of money to do these movies. That's what you're learning too, is like you just need a really good concept. You need, obviously you need to have a talented filmmaker, but it sounds like, yeah, like you have a cool idea, then audiences will kind of go along with that and forgive some, budgetary constraints, if you will, if there's something compelling about, what they're seeing, even if it is just the story at the heart of it. And I think that that's what we're seeing here, because Obsession was made for less than $1 million, and it looks decent. It looks really good, and it's also more character driven, so that, it just shows you that there are different ways to approach storytelling. You don't have to give them copy paste, like I said, we'll get Obsession 15 and we'll having a different conversation in 10 years. So
Obsessed with Obsession. That'll be the 15th title.
Still obsessed.
Well, listeners, we're going to jump into a review starting with Obsession, but what are your thoughts here? What do you think about the rise of horror this summer? Any of the films we just mentioned, do you want to see 15 more Backrooms, or do you want to see some other creepypasta? When does Slender Man get his day in court? Because I know that's coming undeniably. You can let us know. If you're watching on YouTube, you can comment below the video right below us there, or you can send us an email at thecinematropis@gmail.com, or if you're watching one of our Insta Reels, you can tag us there. We'd love to hear from you. It's going to be spoilers ahoy, by the way. We'll timestamp each one of these so you can kind of skip ahead as you desire. With that said, though, let's move into our review of Obsession.
I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
So according to IMDb, Obsession is described as, after breaking the mysterious one-wish willow to win the crush's heart, a hopeless romantic finds himself getting exactly what he asked for, but soon discovers that some desires come at a dark, sinister cost. So a few fun facts about Obsession. This is the theatrical debut of Curry Barker we mentioned before. He is a YouTuber turned feature filmmaker. He had previously made a film, Milk and Cereal, in 2024. He's also only 26 years old. The film stars Michael Johnson as Baron Bear Bailey and Indy Neveretti as Nikki Freeman. And the film premiered during the Midnight Madness block at Toronto International Film Festival in September of 2025. And then it was picked up by Focus Features the following October. And the film opened earlier this summer, May 15th, 2026. And as Laurent already noted, this was budgeted for under $1 million, $750,000, and has grossed an estimated $407 million to date, which is just completely unheard of. And effective June 28th, Obsession actually outgrossed Sinners as the highest grossing live action English language original film of 2020s. Totally nuts. This is never happens. I think, Laurent, you were going on about, you mentioned the Titanic thing. I think I read when it was like doing its like weekly growth thing, this is like the first time it was like 3 or 4 weeks in since like E.T. that a movie had legged out in such a way, which is just madness. Well, that said, Matt Donato, what did you think of Obsession?
So Obsession, I'm definitely positive on. I was able to see it at Fantastic Fest on its second wave of festival programming, because obviously, like you just said, it killed Midnight Madness and it showed up at Fantastic Fest. And I was so lucky to see it because like Focus, I think, picked it up right around there. And I was like, oh, they're gonna stash this, hold it. No one else is gonna see this until then. And it actually played South by, and I was very surprised by that. So it was very much like, I knew how confident Focus was in it by going to South by, because they were just like, this movie is what it is. Let's get one more wave of reactions out of a festival. But like, they weren't like a Netflix that just hoarded it. And I think that is speaking correctly on it. They knew what they had and they knew what this movie was. And that is an original concept that is batshit crazy. It is well thought out and well executed. Like you said, it looks good too. Like for a movie that was made for under $1 million, like it looks like, man, like you can't tell it was an indie or whatever you want to call it, or like low budget comparatively, obviously, to other titles. And this movie just it is on the back of Indy Neveretti. Like I think just what she does in this is absolutely phenomenal. one of the best roles I have seen this year, one of the best roles I think that should be in for awards contention, barring a miracle run of actresses going above and beyond, like, in my opinion. But I what she does in this and how she is able to play the dual Nickies and be such a tormented character, but also do so much tormenting, I think, as a horror film that is so character driven, as said before, and doesn't really need a lot of practical or anything like that. Indy is just a miracle. Like this movie is a runaway for her. And don't get me wrong, like Curry Barker, like sharp presentation, sharp everything there. Like he's got the right direction, he's got the right ideas going forward, and what they end up coming out with is so comically dark in a way that just it sticks with you. It's impossible to kind of like shake it from your memory, and that is the telltale of a great movie. It's if you're talking about it this much, if I can't go on TikTok still to this day, and how long has it been out? We're talking July 12th as we're recording this, and my TikTok is still just conspiracy theories about I went to see Obsession for the 5th time, and I found this new little thing in there that, you know, Nikki is really a cat, and it's like, what the hell? Like,
I read that one.
So for a movie to inspire that much talk and that much generational kind of power, I think, again, this is one of the times that the hype is right. This is one of the times that we all saw a movie where we're like, holy crap, hold on to your pants, this is going to change things. And you know what? A lot of people were right about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Game changer. And I totally agree with you. Indy is I mean, she's going to be getting so many calls, and like her career is about to get a rocket strapped to it. I can't wait. I've heard she's already meeting with the director of X-Men. So, you know, like she is about to have a life alter. This movie was a life altering, career altering performance for her, and she did the work, man. She is like this is the definition of a breakout talent. I've never heard of this person. She shows up and not only like steals the movie, but like all the memes are overwhelmingly of her. You know, her reactions, the no. Like it's just iconic moments that you can meme. And I think obviously have perforated all aspects of culture outside of even just like the cinema or movie internet. LeBron Chapman, what did you think of Obsession?
You know, it's funny because I went into this like the highest of expectations because of the internet frenzy and everything like that, and was so excited. And I left the first time, and I've seen it twice now. I left the first time with very, very complicated feelings about it, mainly because I wasn't sure what the objective in terms of who I was supposed to be empathizing or sympathizing with, you know, throughout the story. And I needed the answer to that question before I knew how I truly felt about this. And Curry Baker actually articulated, you know, this in an interview. And then when I went and saw it the second time with that context, it just made everything lock into place for me. I was definitely impressed with the presentation and Indy Navarrette's performance. Like, again, all timer, because I really feel like I also love that we're starting to talk about, like, I've been championing this since like I was like 10 years old, but definitely like legitimizing horror as like a viable like awards playing thing. You know, like we've been seeing that now with Sinners and The Substance, and, you know, different, and even Get Out a little further back. You know, like we're seeing like people starting to realize that there is a lot of really quality good work that goes into the craftsmanship of horror films, and I'm glad that they're starting to do that. But I think initially my first bug was I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be identifying with Bear's character in the story, and him being, and then I guess Curry Baker being a Gen Zer, and it kind of playing like into that. I thought, I feel like this guy is kind of a monster and he's doing terrible things, but I don't know, like, I know the movie's propping him up as this sympathetic character, you know, like he's, and initially that is very effective. But once he starts making certain decisions that we'll talk about later, you know, I was just like, I hope the takeaway is not that he's the victim in all of this, because I'm so glad on the second watch that, you know, that being articulated from Curry Baker was like that was the objective. Was I tried to complicate an archetype that so many people immediately, you know, full stop, you know, inherently trust or inherently sympathize with. And I'm trying to prove that even that character that you see that you normally set out to pity or feel bad for is capable of doing terrible things and making terrible decisions. And I think that made the movie much more rich in its complication of that drama in the story, to make every decision kind of muddied the waters. It's not that neither one of them are perfect. There's flaws on both sides, but he is not this sanctified character that we're supposed to just say, oh, that poor guy, he didn't deserve any of this. That's what I needed, basically for the movie to lock in.
It's interesting. I had a very different reaction to that, because I kind of, from the opening conversation he was having with his buddy in that very opening scene, I was like, this guy, not a good guy. I like to your point though, LeRon, like, I think the thing that it's a subtlety, because you're asking yourself as the audience member, am I supposed to be judging this person immediately, or should I be giving them the benefit of the doubt? And I think for me, where I was like, I'm never on this guy's trains, is at every point, there's a lot of very subtle nuances in his choices that tell you he's actually just a really selfish person.
Yeah.
He calls, after he realizes what he's done, he realizes that he's messed up by breaking the twig, and he's not getting the response he wanted or expected. He immediately calls the hotlines like, yeah, so it's not, oh, can I undo this, or, oh, can I help her? It's, can I like tweak the wish a little? Like, because he's still operating under this thought process of like, well, I can still get my way, So anyway, like, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I was immediately like, this guy is kind of scummy.
And I couldn't tell immediately, because it felt like, obviously the movie's kind of anchored around him. So I was like, wait, is he the hero of this story? Because it doesn't feel like he is. And that was an interesting tension I was having throughout the whole process. And but to your point though, like he's consistently making choices in service of himself. Yeah. There's a moment where, a very creepy moment, a very terrifying moment, where with the dual Nickies, where one of them is creeping out, and you can kind of hear her voice saying like, please just end this, like end all this, and then he immediately gets into defensive mode and says, well, would it be so bad to just be with me? It's like, even still, you are like in this, like, trying to find your dominance in this dynamic, and that just, so it makes for very interesting conversations about privilege, male loneliness, female bodily autonomy, and so I found on second viewing, when I had that I was able to really like dig into how stealthily this movie is really kind of talking about a lot of very sinister subjects. So
yeah, I think one of my favorite tells on a person is like when they argue that Bear is the victim. And it's just like,
it's a litmus test.
You need to go back and rewatch this, or you just need to never talk again. Either one of those. Like, that is one of those kind of like, the litmus test is there 100% on it, because the entire movie is Nikki being imprisoned. I mean that's what this is. Like, she is trapped in her own body, and Bear is the reason. And it's whether you're supposed to feel any sort of sympathy at the beginning or something, he's just a nice guy. It's that conversation though. Is he a good person or a nice person? And it comes to light all of that stuff. It comes to light everything about the dynamic between them, and the dynamic between men and women, and dating culture, and all these things in society right now, and why why Curry positions him that way is specific. He wants he wants that character to project everything that people see as, oh, well, he's not threatening, he's nice. What do you mean?
He wouldn't harm anybody.
Exactly.
He didn't mean to do this to her. I mean, which is kind of like, I will say, like, the one bit of like pity I take with the character, pity's not even that word. The thing he wants is an innocent thing. How many among us have had a crush on a girl and said, man, I just wish she would like me, right? That's an innocent enough thing. It's that he acts on it. Okay. And even the acting on it, he doesn't know that the twig's when he breaks, it's gonna do that necessarily. But the thing was, she just gave him an out. Like, she had literally just said, do you like me? Yeah. Like, just have an honest conversation.
There was an opportunity to do it in the organic way, but he still had to do it on his own terms, and that came to bite him in the ass and then some. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. Overall, I really dug this film a lot. It's, I will say that when I heard the premise about it before I watched the film, I was like, is this enough to really sustain an entire movie? I was a little, not like overly skeptical, but I was like, how is this movie really going to keep me like on the edge of my seat the whole time? Because it's like, okay, it's a romantic twist. She's out to get him. That actually sounds kind of like it's going to burn itself out within like 30 minutes. And I was so wrong. Again, Indy just carrying some of these scenes. And I think they slow played a lot of the best stuff. And then used a lot of just kind of like situational humor, turn horror, classic thing where you're like, oh, we're on a date. Except for she's obsessed with me. Oh, we're at a party and she's obsessed. They just came with a lot of really clever ways to make all of these scenarios deeply uncomfortable. And because her possessed self is so unpredictable, it just really has you on the edge. You're like, there's so many times where it's the not Chekhov's gun, it's Chekhov's trapped girlfriend, and like you're like, oh, she's gonna do something crazy in the scene. I just don't know.
You never know what it's gonna be, but you're like something terrible is about to happen, and the tension of not knowing what form it's going to take is always a thrill in it. And I also think that there's moments, Matt, you kind of alluded to it in her performance of the tormentor and being tormented, but there are little glimmers where moments, like split second moments that I noticed on the second time where like you can see her going in and out of that duality. And it's so fascinating. I'm like, how I would, if I was going to ask her a question, just like, how the hell did you do that? How did you access that? Do you have borderline personality disorder? Like what's going on? Because it's pretty ingenious, like where a moment where you see, like for a second, you see pleading and then immediately goes into something dark. And it's just very, 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 very fascinating to watch. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, I think the other thing I'd say, you guys have already said pretty much everything else so well, but I really love that this is a go for broke bleak ending. I think that's where it's a great ride, but the impact lands. The fact that I'm going to be thinking about it is, damn, they didn't pull any punches. This movie is a sad, sad ending. No one wins, even though Anina Reda is out of the curse. She is now had to like be like a passenger through all of these events that have happened and is just mortified. Anyway, kudos to Curry Barker for just really going for it, I have to say. Okay, speaking of Curry Barker, though, we've talked a lot about him as a director. He's done a lot of YouTube work. I'm just kind of curious, what about his direction you think really sticks out to you as like a unique sort of flavor? I think, the best comp I can come up with is the Talk to Me folks. They're both the YouTuber background, but he's not exactly like them either. So he's doing something kind of different. So Matt, like when you think about Curry Barker and like what he does well as a director, what sticks out to you?
I mean, go back to his sketch comedy stuff. I mean, if you go back to That's a Bad Idea and everything that he built himself on was funny. Obviously, it was a different type of comedy and they were playing for laughs. But all of those, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of those skits have a dark underlying ick to them. Yeah. And you are laughing more because they are scenarios and like social commentary scenarios specifically where it's a lot of observational humor on normal stuff played out in strange ways. Like one of my favorites it's probably a lot of everyone's favorite is like the negative tip bit they do. And it's just like, no, you have to pay me now. It's a negative tip. That's how the tip works. I put a negative, like it's such a stupid thing. It's such a stupid skit, but it's very funny because it's a scenario we can all reflect on and be like, oh, that's actually hilarious. Yeah. Haha. And when you look at Obsession, that's exactly what he's doing here. He's taking a scenario that is actually pretty common in modern culture right now. Again, the whole toxic masculinity, the divide between nice and good, all that stuff. We all know a guy like that. We all know scenarios like that. We all see maybe some things in those characters that once upon a time we're like, oh shit, I'm glad I'm not that person anymore, stuff like that. And the way that he is able to take the comedy in such a way that makes you laugh, and yet the darkness he is able to achieve, he's not sacrificing any bit of the punch of Obsession by making you laugh throughout it. He is using the comedy to accentuate how fucked up the scenario is. Like that is what I think he is best at and what he has done throughout his career to become popular. So it's one of those conversations about how comedy and horror go hand in hand and why the best comedians I know are the darkest minds I've ever encountered, that kind of thing. And I think Curry is that example. It's an example of you have to go to some real strange places to achieve the kind of creativity that something like Obsession becomes from. But he does so, and he does so quote unquote fearlessly in a way that is of his own kind of boundaries and not caring about certain things. And in doing so, it makes sure that there is no barrier he hits. He doesn't reach a ceiling and can't go any higher. This movie is 100% just let's go for it. let's do it and see what happens. And the see what happens is a $400+ billion success.
Yes. Yeah, no, incredible. And I think, you know, there is that whole thing with comedians where you're saying you have to learn how to make people uncomfortable to laugh. There's that weird connection between discomfort and humor. And that it all, I would say more frequently than not, overlaps. And it's like learning how to use that power to scare people, you know, is that takes a real terrific writer director. I think. Lauren, what's your take on Curry Barker?
Yeah, it's kind of like the sociological effect that he's kind of implying here. And I feel like it's kind of like this sly way that he's challenging the audience to kind of question their own moral ethical compass, and asking very, very uncomfortable questions about, our own empathy, our own humanity, and our own privileges that we might have in certain scenarios, or our own dominance we might have, maybe our male gaze over certain women, in that dynamic, and the film is very deceptively simple, on the surface. We've seen a monkey paw type of scenario implemented. What was it? The monkey just came out recently. But it's just like, but there's something, again, just something deeply disturbing about the kind of dark underbelly of humanity that he's really kind of itching at. And it's not removed from us. It includes us, in that way. And I think that's what's really interesting is, you could say, oh, I'm not like Bear, but like you guys just mentioned, like maybe I'm not like Bear now, but I might have been like Bear when I was 20. You know what I mean? Like, and so that's what's interesting about it is the way that nobody's really kind of walks away unscathed, or at least challenged in some type of way about the kind of corrosive decisions that are made by his character throughout the story. So
I think one of my favorite things, just like playing off that really quickly, is the memes that people are making now of like characters that would have made the same choice as Bear. Yeah. And it's like one of the most popular ones is like How I Met Your Mother. And like, think about how long How I Met Your Mother ran and how beloved it was, and the way that people looked at that show. And then like you go back on it now, however long later we are removed from it, and maybe in a different mindset as a culture. And it's like, oh yeah, there was so much shady shit in that show that like, and yet it was on prime time, and again, a beloved sitcom kind of idea. So yeah, just like playing along with that. Might not have been, but hey, like 20 years ago,
it's always great in retrospect to kind of pretend we've always been the evolved, progressive, you know what I mean? People that we've always been with, but literally go back and watch any of our favorite movies from the 90s, and we're like,
oh yeah,
things that are said and done in those movies that I no longer subscribe to, that, like you try to just look past and like, yep, I never found that transphobic comment funny, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, I was rewatching the Scary Movie franchise recently in preparation for Scary Movie 6, and there were some things in Scary Movie 1 I was like, I still think the movie's funny, to be fair, but there's a couple things in there that probably would not fly today, and that's a testament, to some of the things I feel like he's kind of provoking here.
Not to derail it, but this reminds me of one of my favorite jokes from one of my favorite movies of the year, Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie. If you haven't seen the movie yet, check it out. You'll know, but the whole punchline is built around, wow, 2008, that wasn't that long ago, right? Man, what we thought funny, it was funny in 2008. So yeah. I think that's a great point. The last thing I'd add to, I think you guys have spoken so well about like sort of the balance between horror and comedy, and, reflecting on like identity and what's considered culturally appropriate today. The other thing I'd add is he does have that YouTuber background, and I'm here on this podcast. I'm not new to YouTube content. I am new to YouTube content for this podcast, and it's been a really interesting learning opportunity. Like, you get so much feedback, and not even just like direct, like, hey, I leave a comment. It's you're looking at how long did people watch? When did they drop off? When did they comment? And I think what Curry Barker has is, a ton of experience, just as a young, scrappy filmmaker making YouTube videos. And he's able to like hone in on, this is when we're going to lose the audience. Like, or here's the kind of thing that gets a strong reaction in my YouTube videos. And he was able to take those lessons and put it into a feature film. And, I didn't think about this initially, but I think I mentioned earlier that I think is related to even what you were saying, Matt, is this movie is a lot of vignettes, kind of like there's a through line, but it's like all these different scenarios that are strung together through a plot, and it is based around like some of those comedic bits that they're funny because they're so deeply uncomfortable and fucked up. But you could just do, if this was like Key and Peele, these are all these scenarios that we're going through all feel like sketch comedy in that way. And I think what he's doing is bringing that sketch comedy flavor to horror for a new generation. You mentioned LaRon's shorter attention spans earlier. That's a thing. This movie keeps you hooked. Like it moves even within every scene, there's a laugh or a punchline that really kind of keeps you going. So, and just in terms of where, younger filmmakers are at, a lot of them are kind of cutting their teeth on YouTube. And I think Curry Barker's ahead of the curve in terms of like demonstrating like how that can lead to some really powerful horror storytelling. So really excited to see what he does next. Real quick, we'll wrap up, but you mentioned the monkey's paw, LaRon. Last kind of question I have on this is, Curry Barker is famously on the press tour been like, oh yeah, I was inspired to write this story based on the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror sketch that was based on the monkey's paw. He had not read the monkey's paw. He just saw the sketch. So I'm kind of curious in terms, especially if we're thinking about like the way, Gen Z or even millennials to a certain extent, like have learned about a lot of these like classic staples or foundational stories of horror. Why is it important to get, to continue to get a fresh spin on sort of these important horror classics? And Matt, I'll throw it to you.
I think about, so let me put it this way. I've been writing about remakes for Bloody Disgusting now. So horror remakes specifically for a good few years. And it's very funny to me every time I dare say I like a remake more than the original, because it was something that I grew up with versus the prior generation having the original. It's not all the time, but the one that I get yelled at the most for is I would rather watch watch Friday the 13th, 2009 than the first 3 Friday the 13th movies. I don't think they're bad movies. I just think it's brilliant that the remake condenses the first 3 to get straight to the point of the Jason that we know and love. And I say that because my take on the Friday franchise is different from someone else who grew up with 1, 2, 3, 4 and yada yada, and was able to see that evolution happen in real time. And I think both of those takes are correct, because it's just on perspective, but it's just on how you see a franchise, where I think it's important to get that reimagining, because to me, what the remake does so well is get the ferocity and the ferociousness of Jason that we eventually got to first and foremost. And it was a way of looking back on a franchise and being like, how do I take the best parts, reboot it, and just get right to it? And I think that perspective is valid and crucial, and it gives a new generation the ability to fall in love with a character on their own terms. So like just saying in the sense of like, why is it important to have the same stories retold by new visions for new generations? I think it's because it's a fresh way to see an old story. I don't want to see the same Jason over and over again. I don't want to see the same anything over and over again. I want to see a filmmaker, like what we'll talk about later for Evil Dead even more, but like I want to see a filmmaker put their spin on something I know already. So I think that's why it's important. It's important because younger generations deserve as much of an opportunity to fall in love with a franchise on their terms as it is to be welcomed into a long-standing franchise maybe and go back and do the work. And then all of a sudden you have the appreciation anyway. So like, I don't know. I struggle with the idea that the story of the Monkey's Paw exists already, so you should just go read the story and no one should ever do anything different with it. Like I want to see how filmmakers can make their mark by putting their spin on something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that generational handoff, I think, is important too, because what sticks out to millennials or Gen Z or Gen Alpha or even back in the boomers, like the cultural context in which these things are being released is really important. The things that matter, or the specificity of the scenarios that you play out in a monkey's paw sort of thing, goes a long way. And we see it in this movie in the context of romantic relationships for someone who just doesn't have the courage to be honest about his feelings, right? For example. And I think that resonates with a lot of people right now. And there's a million different ways you can slice that story and adapt the idea meaningfully in a way that's going to be more well received and relevant to probably the larger swaths of the audience. LaRon, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I really like that take. The idea that there are, because the one I love is the most recent example is the Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss.
Mm-hmm.
See, like that's an example where, like, if you're going to do a remake of an old film and you're going to recontextualize it for a modern audience and say something that speaks to them in that moment, then that was a very clever way of utilizing this idea of this invisible man, and he's an abuser of her, and this whole context about with the Me Too movement and women not being believed by the experiences that they're actually having and being gaslit in that way. They found a interesting way to contextualize that conversation and kind of distill it in the framework of a horror movie, and still work in the same way that there is this literal invisible entity that is chasing her. So that I found that like a clever repurposing of that. So I think there's definitely room for growth in that sense. But I think in general, just why to keep telling these stories. I mean, I think because they're incredibly versatile and they can be applicable to different situations. They're very malleable, for different discourses, different themes. And I think the audience's familiarity with kind of maybe the format or the structure of that will make it a little bit more digestible for them. But you can also imprint new things in that and constantly, obviously bring new things out of that context. And I think that that's something that another reason why these things continue to work, I think, overall, so.
Yeah. I think that's well said. Versatility is super important. And again, especially when we think about like all the new storytelling opportunities we have with technology, which again, Backrooms coming up to you in a second. There's just a lot of opportunity for you to kind of adapt an idea to give it new meaning that's going to be more directly relevant to that to each generation. So very cool. I think it's awesome that Curry Barker discovered the monkey's paw through The Simpsons. Just goes to show the legacy of The Simpsons is unmatched in American culture. So, all right, guys, let's bring this home. I know we spent a lot of time on Obsession. That's probably the biggest one of the summer so far. But really quickly, before we move on to Backrooms, what letter grade would you give Obsession, LaRon Chapman?
I think it's going to be a generational horror film for a lot of people, a very important milestone, for a lot of them, or a cultural touchstone, I should say. But I think I'm going to give this a B+. I think it's really, really, really solid. I don't think it's perfect, but I do think the kind of conversations that it elicits is very rich, and I think that that'll give it staying power, moving forward. And I do hope that we get new original ideas that give the same effect to this movie and not derivative reiterations of it, because I do think that what he's accomplished here with something, again, that does have familiar pieces, a familiar kind of setup, he's doing something very interesting and unique within that framework. And so I do think it's a really, really solid debut. So.
Excellent. B+, very positive. A big step up from when you first saw it. I saw your first Letterboxd review, so that's great. Yeah. Matt Donato, what letter grade would you give Obsession?
Yeah, I'm actually going to stick with the B+. It's good. It is across the board doing most things right. Indie Never Ready, just again, I will reiterate, just a powerhouse performance, and I hope there is a just world where she gets the awards consideration she deserves, whether it's a win or not. I just think as long as it's the acknowledgement, I think that's deserving. But at the end of the day, like it's not my favorite horror movie of the year so far. It's not even in my top 3, top 4. It is a solid kind of like tension-based relationship thriller comedy, lots of things mixed in there. But there are some aspects of it that I do ding against it. So good movie, absolutely good, deserves everything it's gotten so far. B+ though.
Yeah, B+. I'm on the same train. We're all on the same page. That's great. B+ for me as well. I really like it a lot. I think it's going to endure at least for the next decade or so. I think, again, performances are great. Outstanding sort of like feature film, I guess theatrical feature film debut. And, it has something to say that is very relatable, again, to probably younger audiences. So for all those reasons, I think it's a great movie, B+. It's not perfect. I actually still think it could have been a little shorter, even though I think it's a relatively tight film. And I also think that it's just given where I am in my life, it's not a horror movie I'm like eager to go back and watch 10 times. You know, I've already seen other horror films this year that I can't wait to go back and watch again with friends. I saw it. It's good. Recommend it. Recommend it to tons of people, but it's not like you're saying, Matt, it's not necessarily my favorite, which kind of keeps it for me from teetering into that like A territory. But overall, great movie. Do recommend. And for everyone who's watching or listening, Obsession is now available on PVOD. And as of this week, it is now available on physical media as well. So check it out, Obsession. If you want to continue to fight for physical media when no one else, including Sony, will, buy Obsession on the 4K Blu-ray. All right. Well, those are our thoughts on Obsession. With that said, let's move on to our next film, Backrooms.
It's beautiful. Am I right?
Hello?
So according to IMDb, Backrooms is described as, after a therapist's patient disappears into a dimension beyond reality, she must venture into the unknown to save him. This film is the directorial debut of YouTuber Kane Parsons. Parsons had previously directed the Backrooms (found footage) web series that was based on the creepypasta. The film carries a production budget of $10 million and has so far grossed $360 million to date. So also, it's not quite as big as, $750,000 to $400 million, but it's not too far off. The film stars Chiwetel Ejiofor as Clark, Renata Rinsva as Dr. Mary Klein, and Mark Duplass as Phil. Just Phil. There's no last name, apparently. The film opened in theaters on May 29th. And as I noted a moment ago, Parsons, at age 20, not even allowed to legally drink in the United States, became the youngest director in cinema history to have a film debut at the number one at both the domestic and global box offices. So congratulations, Kane Parsons. Now that you're 21, you can have a beer. Celebrate. Real quick on this one, how familiar were you guys with the creepypastas? Lauren, I'll actually throw it to you first. Are you familiar with the internet lore or anything before you watch the film?
Familiar in the sense that it existed, but not familiar in the sense that I participated in it. And even with my like mad dash to try and like consume all of it really quickly in preparation for this, so much of it has become so disparate now. I can't find just like, where's the rabbit hole? Because it was kind of an organic thing you had to just be a part of at that particular time to get the little, to have the full experience of it. But I generally understand it. And I could see why that would have been very intriguing to a lot of people whenever it released. So.
Very, very good. Matt Donato, how about you? Were you pretty familiar with Backrooms?
Yeah. Again, not in the super fan sense, but I made sure at least that I had watched all the Kane Parsons stuff. So like I went back and I found Kane's YouTube and like watched all of his videos because he was a large catalyst for the visual representation of what the Backrooms became and what we know today. And then also like I love one of my on my algorithm for TikTok, one thing I get a bunch is just Backrooms video game videos. So like the Backrooms video games that have popped up about more, it's more creature based. It's more the unknown is taken to crazier places. And I like that version of the Backrooms where it is just the hazmat suit guys. And there are every room is different. And we do get that represented in the movie, but I think there's a little more fun in the takes that I've seen online. So we can get into that. I think that's
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. I'll be honest. I was familiar with that it existed. I am on a Discord where creepypasta is a topic that comes up from time to time. And I when those conversations come up, I do tend to fall down the internet rabbit hole. So I had seen a few of the earlier web series, but like, honestly, it wasn't a thing I'd really given much meaningful thought to before the film. But when they announced the movie, I was like, oh, yep, that's a thing that exists. Can't wait to see what they do with it. Well, that said, what are your overall thoughts on Backrooms? And Matt, sounds like you got some thoughts here. I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, number one, off the bat, I am very happy that A24 gave Kane Parsons a shot because, again, like him being as integral as he was to the Backrooms itself taking off on Reddit and everything else, like with those videos, not many times do we actually get to see the person responsible for a cultural upheaval in some type of media to get that chance to go to the cinematic adaptation. Like sometimes, let's say most of the times, it's here's a payday. We're going to take your idea. We're going to give it to another director. They're going to go with it. So I think in practice, it is absolutely awesome that they gave Kane Parsons the shot. And they surrounded him with Jason Blum, Oz Perkins. Like literally he had, I mean, Duplass being there too. Maybe not for everything, but like everyone being involved in that way. Like Kane Parsons had the correct stable of directors to basically mentor him. And I say that because of all the directors that mentored him, Oz Perkins is the one I struggle the most with. Mm-hmm. Just not as a person, but as a filmmaker. I am just, if you listen to my podcast or if I've forgotten, me and Matt Monagle, my co-host, are the two opposite sides of the Oz spectrum. I am the Monkeys is best movie, Long Legs is fine, the rest are unwatchable. Monagle is like, no, he's a genius. Everything he does is brilliant, and his type of slow burn horror is what more horror should be. So when I came into this, I was very much nervous of the backrooms that we would get. And I think Kane Parsons does a great job when it feels like he's tying back to his old videos. And the opening alone, just giving you that first shot of let's go into the back rooms. It is that shaky cam kind of found footage that Kane did with Blender and Illustrator, like crazy just to take two programs and do this himself. Yeah. But when it feels like old Kane, when it feels like the movie is just lost in the back rooms, I'm into it. Design is fantastic. Like this is the big budget backrooms movie visually that I was expecting at the right times. It gets creepy. It gets very asymmetrical. It gets very trippy. That is the good stuff. What loses me is I think this is an overcomplicated backrooms movie in an unnecessary way. I think that the movie tries to tie in a relevance between Chiwetel's character and the backrooms themselves that does a disservice to the unknowns of the backroom. That to me is I am not grading the movie on what I didn't get, but I was a little bummed that we didn't just get a group of people lost in the back rooms and every room gets darker, nastier, and stuff like that. So I struggled with the back rooms in that it is a bit overlong for what it's trying to do. It gets lost in the story it's trying to tell, I believe, in Chiwetel's character and the way his emotional journey kind of navigates through this labyrinth. But I'm conflicted because there are aspects of it, like when it is the liminal horror backrooms, when it is doing that stuff that's in your face, I like it, but it's a confused movie that didn't have to be confused. And I think Kane Parsons, when it becomes the Oz Perkins version of Kane Parsons specifically, that is when this movie really lost me. So that's where I am with it. I'm stuck in the middle, somewhere there.
Yeah. I more thoughts. I'll pass to LeRon first, but I will say, there's an entire movie's worth of movie of just Chiwetel Ejiofor and random the people that he gets lost with in the middle of the movie. Like there's a whole movie there about a whole journey he has that we just don't see. And I was like, I kind of wanted just that. Remove the beginning and the end. I just wanted that. Chiwetel Ejiofor and his comrades walking around this weird space with not sure what they're going to find. Yeah, I totally feel that. LeRon, what did you think of Backrooms?
No, I echo that. That is actually, I think I wrote that in one of my reviews, that essentially that I really just wanted to see, because it's so intriguing to watch him go through the rooms. And I just wanted to see his descent into madness with all of that. Because when we shift over to Renata Reinsva's character, and then we come back to Chiwetel Ejiofor, and we see that he's already in Crazy Town. I was like, well, wait, there's some stitching here that was missed that would have been really interesting to see.
Like a whole movie's worth of stitching, by the way.
Yeah, and honestly, like I almost feel like the double fister here with both of these characters. Like I'm fine. I love both of them. I think they're both very talented. I think they elevate the characters that are on the page, even though I think that they're very thinly written here. I just think that, if they had streamlined this a bit more, I honestly feel like she could have just came in the third act and we could have spent all that time. Maybe she was there at the top with the introduction with the as the therapist, and then we see him go through that madness, and then she bookends it, versus having it be almost feeling like we're supposed to focusing on two characters, but not really giving either one of them the full weight that they deserve. But that being said, I mean, to your point, Matt, about the liminal space horror is a lot of fun. And I think the production design is like, it's like artfully ugly if that's a way to describe it. Like it's heinous to look at, but it's also so intricately designed. And I found like that the sound design was really strong in it. There's a really strong vision here, and I do think that Ken Parsons is very talented, and he clearly has a distinct voice. And I am very curious to see what he does next. I do think the movie is a bit muddled, and it is kind of, I won't say incomprehensible, but there are certain elements of it that definitely are not, even for ambiguous sake, being ambiguous for ambiguous sake, there's things that still don't quite connect there by the end of the story as a whole. But overall, I think it's a strong debut with really promising potential from this filmmaker. So
I think the async stuff is the perfect example of that. I think the async stuff for me is very much Phil. Phil's just there, and I get that is the purpose of Phil, and it's supposed to be this nebulous government kind of conspiracy thing going on, and what the company is, and maybe it's not governmental, but like all this stuff. I understand the conspiratorial nature it is going for, but by paying so little attention to it and yet having it be the end of the movie, it's throwing things into this Backrooms movie that just don't play well together in the formula it is written. Let's put it that way. Like I think the Two-Hander is perfect about it, where you have two characters who are both interesting in their own ways, and yet we don't see such important parts of it where like the point that lost me, and like again we're allowed to do full spoiler, I just want to double check. Okay. Yep. So like the point that lost me is when said therapist is in the back rooms and trying to figure out the nightmare she is about to be hurled into, and she finds the drawing on the wall that clearly outlines that it's Triumphantly and the giant mascot version of himself like looking at him. And I'm like, oh, you've erased everything that is interesting about the back rooms to me. You've erased the idea that there is an inexplicable reason why all this stuff is happening. And you've actually spelled out the third act for me in a single illustration. Like, why was any of that necessary? Because there was no grand reveal at the dinner table to me then. I know exactly what's coming. I know exactly what the monster is. Like, the idea of these Backrooms videos that I love watching is just the sea creature in the pool, like, or the siren head looking thing chasing around. Like, you never know what it is because it's not supposed to totally make sense. Where I understand you are now telling a theatrical version of this and you need some kind of comprehensive story for an audience to grasp onto. But I think the way that they strung this one together in that scene was like the biggest, it fell apart for me from then on. And that is basically the beginning of the third act. And I'm just sitting there going like, I know. You told me. You spelled it out. You did the thing. Why would you do that?
Exposition there towards the end too. And once he gives that long monologue, I was like, oh, I liked it better when I was trying to figure it out. I didn't want you just to tell me all in a 5-minute speech. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of mystique that gets removed there, I think, in the third act.
It's not scary in the third act either. That's the thing. Like, none of it, it's over explained, and it's just not scary. It was scary when it was a mystery. It was scary when I didn't understand it. And yeah, Matt, to your point, the randomness and the discovery of these bizarre things you can't explain. That was when I was like, oh man, this movie is really cooking. But I just think that the script was not good enough. The writing was not good enough to develop either one of those characters. I think you have two great leads who were doing a lot of lifting, but the writing was just paper thin. And then, when you combine that with Phil's character, it just feels like we were trying to shove too much into this one movie. And I think, Matt, I appreciate you don't want to review what the movie is not, but it really feels like, maybe you tee up the sort of like conspiracy angle for the next movie, but you're also kind of, at least for me, I was like, okay, so like, how is this going to pay off? What's going to happen with this? And when it does, I was very confused. I was like, well, what was the point of all of that? We're sitting here, he's explaining what the backrooms are kinda, and then we get that weird stinger at the end. And I'm just like, I kind of like the end because it's so confusing and it's a big question mark. I like the absurdity of it, but in terms of trying to derive any sort of like meaningful like analysis about what Ken Parsons was trying to talk about with human psychology, I feel like the whole thing was pretty flat. Honestly, could have been again 20 minutes shorter. I think, and honestly, I think the parts that were not in the back rooms were overproduced. I think it would have been nicer if we were actually closer to the lower five, somewhere a lot closer to the low five video camera, because it just felt like two different movies that, and the connective tissue there was like so distinct that it almost kind of like took me out of it when I was watching it. But the vibes were so good.
Yeah,
the vibes were so good.
Vibes were good.
Yeah. I don't know. What did you guys make of the ending? I'm just curious, because I was left sitting here thinking, what the hell? Okay, sure.
I feel like a version of her is trapped in that space just indefinitely. What I do love, though, about this movie is the way it plays with this concept of memory, and how sometimes I do this often, where like I'll think of something and I'm like, is this something I actually experienced, or is this something that someone has told me a million times, and I have in my mind's eye what that experience was, and I'm so far removed from it years now to know whether I was actually present for it or if I'm just remembering how they told me about it. Then it kind of plays with that idea where you see something, especially like dream logic, like how you see something so specific, that only you know about in this unfamiliar space, and you're kind of navigating, like whenever I'm sure we've all at one point in our life, whenever we were dreaming, we've been conscious that we're dreaming and we're the avatar walking through our own, subconscious. It gets that really well done. It does that very effectively for me. Where something doesn't make sense. Here's this weird beige wall, but here's my rattle from when I was 3 that my dad gave me, and I just remember the conversation. You know what I mean? Like it finds an interesting way to converge these really indelible images with a very eerie sense of dread, throughout. And that's when it's working for me. It's like the inexplicable. It's just mysterious. We're just navigating into those rooms. Honestly, this could have been somewhat plotless for me, and I would have been fine with that if we had streamlined it, made it shorter, and it was just about the vibes or the experiences of that. I think when it tries to settle in and be like a very like here's a mystery story, and we have the more conventional elements of those kinds of things, is when it kind of feels like these things are discordant and they're not connecting with each other. So. But yeah, I think she's trapped there in that space, and I do love that final image of her face. It's a very that's something I won't forget. So
yeah, it's the duplication of the memory too. It's the way that it'll never be perfect. It's the augmentation of perfection in that way, and it goes right along with everything the movie is. It's striking visually. I love that montage at the end of like the things that are added to the back rooms because of the memories of the people that it's just devoured, whatever you want to call it, absorbed or anything like that. So that's such a cool montage of seeing all those storefront facades or park bench, like whatever it was, just being added in such strange ways to the back rooms. And it is just it's this reminder of like how our memories can trick us and what our memories can do to us. And, the idea of locking them away and letting them deteriorate versus maybe just confronting things and stuff, because it goes along with the question is like, did Chiwetel kill his wife? And that whole, angle that is for you to decipher. And like the answer that I come up with like is yes. Like there's enough evidence there to say like that is part of the equation, and it is a man running from not only his traumas but also that type of memory that he wants to keep away, whether it's true or not. I just think that is an interesting wrinkle to that story if we are just going to take Backrooms for how we want to take it.
Yeah, no, I think you guys nailed it. It's sort of the reconstruction of memory, and how I guess if you want to look at the Backrooms as a form of like collective trauma, how it sort of sucked in the trauma takes your memory and distorts it, and the more you try and like recreate it in your mind's eye, the scarier and more like unsettling it becomes over time. Again, I don't really have a solid through line about, what that says about human psychology, but it was kind of a really interesting way to end the movie that kind of reinstates why I like the movie. I was like, I can't explain this.
It's really weird. It's touching on some things that feel interesting, even if I don't fully understand it. And the mystery is the scary, unnerving part, the thing we're thinking about. So I was pretty happy with the ending. I guess maybe the last question before we get a letter grades on Backrooms. I mean, Matt, you're writing about tons of horror movies all the time. Like, what would you say when you look at Backrooms? Is there anything in particular that sort of sticks out from sort of this other sort of similar, like, indie studio, like or an A24 or a Blumhouse smaller studio sponsored or produced horror?
I would say that it's the film's ability going back to the visual component of it and letting it play in the lo-fi elements, because like the Backrooms are largely, again, these handy cam videos, or what do you want to say? Like, it's supposed to be a little diluted quality. It's supposed to be older. It's supposed to be all these things. So they let Kane Parsons still do what got him there, I guess to say. Like, they didn't force the entire movie into this traditional model of what a theatrical movie should look like. I think the difference here is that A24 was able to give Kane Parsons the runway to be like, hey, what you did took off. What you did is the secret sauce here. So we don't want to put you completely up against the wall and say, like, you have to conform to what a traditional version of the Backrooms would look like. Do your thing. Like you stick to what you think will work because you've already done this. I think that is the element here, that it is the X factor. Whether you like the movie or not, that's different. But like, what makes Backrooms so unique is that it is, at the end of the day, despite what people were arguing over and over again, that he didn't direct it, all this other shit, like, this is his movie. It's up and down his movie, and it takes risks that, while I don't even agree with the outcome and execution of them, I'm happy that Kane Parsons was able to retain his control over the movie. Because again, if you do watch his videos of the Backrooms and you do see where like the Backrooms did come from, it's there. Like, it is a faithful enough adaptation. I just think the one thing that does get away from him, and it does become too, consumer friendly, is the idea that they had to create some kind of story people could latch onto. That's the one thing that really does feel the most like he was forced to go the feature film route and do it the way that people know. But the rest of the stuff it's there, it's right. And he was able to do it on his terms. So I think that's the difference. That's the difference of get a different studio, maybe, or like, Universal or someone, a mainstream studio getting Backrooms. I think that version of it would look different and sound different. For sure. All that.
Yeah. What do you think, Lauren?
Yeah, it seems overwhelmingly, it seems like he was able to make the movie he wanted to make. It seems like he kind of tripped himself up a little bit with the need to kind of ground it in some kind of, like you said, more streamlined. Because I think what people were drawn to about this particular property is basically that it was kind of living in the abstraction of everything. And I feel like, he's not interested in kind of holding your hand through this process until he there at the end of the movie is, and decides to just spell it out in a way that is far less interesting than what we watched prior, and so but I think when this movie is working really well, is definitely like when it's leaning into the skinamarink aspect of things, where we're just in the id, we're just in the sauce. We don't know where we're at, we don't know what we're hearing, and it's going to be so different for each person based on whatever trigger points or trauma points that they've experienced in their lives, and that's when I think it's at its most effective, and because it does feel like this movie is essentially, exploring memories and feelings and trauma and showing how those kinds of things can imprison us as individuals, and how kind of our own emotional shortcomings, can, affect our lives moving forward. And so that's what's interesting about it. And I don't think there's so many ways you could go with that, in your own head, that I don't think the movie needed to compartmentalize it in that way. And so it's kind of just a mixed bag where it's like there are really, really, really strong elements. And, but then there are these individual moments where it's like he pulled back the daring a little bit in that sense to get to be a little bit more formulaic when the movie isn't calling for that at all. But whenever he's leaning into that, the abstraction of the story, I feel like that's when That's what's differentiating this movie from, say, your more mainstream popular horror movies. That's the part of this that feels fresh and unique and exciting. So.
Well, I think you guys have both nailed it. And while I know we joked about there being, 25 backrooms, I certainly would love to see Caden Parsons do backrooms too, and like just let him loose, honestly, because I think the criticism we're talking about here, I think is something we've seen a lot of online, and hopefully that note actually makes it through to the studio or the producers. And this one was so successful, he's able to get another stab at it where he has even more space to lean into the weird stuff that we like about this movie, the vibes and the unpredictability, and sort of honing in on what he does best. So I would really love to see a second one of these, given that he's able to really just lean into what's weird. Give me the Skinamarink crossover, LaRon. I mean, come on, it's right there. What letter grade would we give Backrooms? And LaRon Chapman, I'll start with you.
I do think there are so many strong components in this. I do think this is still a very, very impressive debut. I've seen a lot of first-time debuts that make me say, I don't care what this person does next. I don't want to see it, versus this one, I'm like, even it's interesting, even in its flaws and even in its shortcomings, where I'm like, he has a vision that it could go so many different directions, and I'm very curious to see what that's like. So I'm landing on a B-. I don't think it's perfect. I think it's kind of shaggy, and it needs to be anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes shorter. But I do think overall there are elements in this I'm intrigued enough about that I think are worthy of recommendation. So,
all right, B-. That's pretty positive, I'd say. Matt Donato, what letter grade would you give Backrooms?
Yeah, letter grades are always funny to me because I think about the people who are like, oh, like a D+ is a failing grade, but like in my opinion, it's not. Like right. in my opinion, like an F is a failing grade, and that's all of that. So all that to say, just like I still consider this positive, but barely positive, but I would give it a C+. I'm just in that camp of like, when I wrote my review, I teetered, and I was writing the entire review out being like, am I truly positive on this? I know I'm mixed, but like, am I leaning negative? Am I leaning positive? And at the end of the day, I am leaning positive on it for the reasons we did just discuss. I think there's a lot of strength here to show where Caden Parsons is going to excel as a filmmaker. And there's enough of this movie that had me feeling a little creepy and feeling, the engagement that I wanted to feel from it while it's not sustained throughout. I think it's still there enough. So for a debut, God bless it. It's a C+.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. C+, I think it's good, not great. Yes, I also think a C+ is a positive grade, by the way. You still made a pretty good movie, especially for a directorial debut at age 20. I'll tell you what, things I was making at age 20 didn't look half this good. I'll tell you that much. So, I think this is just a very promising debut. It's good, not great. And I just think what works about it is the filmmaker's instincts, as we've already talked about, and what doesn't work is the more conventional stuff. So let's lean into that. The conventional stuff gets gets an F, or at least a D- type territory. Whereas, if we're looking at just sort of like the vibes, the style, and all that, you're looking at probably like a B+, A-. So this gets a C+ from me as well. Backrooms, for those of you who are wondering, just hit PVOD earlier this week. So if you haven't seen it, you can experience it at home, and I think it's probably still playing in some theaters with the extra content that they've initiated with their release. So check it out in theaters. Let's move on to Leviticus.
It's gonna kill him! This is what they wanted. They wanted us to be scared.
So according to IMDb, Leviticus is described as two teenage boys must escape a violent entity that takes the form of the person they desire most, each other. So this film is the debut feature film from writer-director. I'm trying real hard. I looked it up. I'm going to try not to fudge it. It's Ajan Kiria, I think, had previously debuted by directing TV in Australia. The film stars Joe Bird, Stacey Clausen, and of course, one of our favorites, Mia, which I always say her name wrong. Mia Wasikowska. Yes.
Worcestershire sauce. Yes.
Apologies, Mia. I need to work on saying your name better. The film is named after the book of Leviticus and the Holy Christian Bible. Several verses in the book are often used by religious conservatives as evidence for the divine prohibition of homosexuality. So I won't read too much into it, but if you're curious, Leviticus 18:22 or Leviticus 20:13, if you're willing to do some real in-depth research, check those out. The film did open in the U.S. theaters on June 19th. It's still playing, not super duper wide, but I've still seen showtimes in my area, so you can still check it out there. And it carries a production budget of just $3.5 million and has grossed an estimated $7.6 million to date. So, about double the investment. So that's pretty good for a horror film of this budget. Now, when we were talking about summer horror, this is an episode Laurent and I have been talking about for a couple of months, even before we knew some of these were going to be hits. Laurent, you specifically said that you wanted to talk about Leviticus, though. So I just wanted to kind of dig into what about this film in particular was of interest to you?
Well, honestly, it was I just read the premise and I thought it was so intriguing, but also because it's kind of taking this, it follows a spin on the It Follows idea, but recontextualizing it with queer desire, and now in this case the demonic entity acts as a kind of spiritual gay conversion therapy, and I'm like, that's a lot of meat in one, in of a concept, for a movie. And also I immediately was like, why hasn't this already been made? Because this is a conversation that's happened for a while, and all the kind of social I guess social message horror, if you will, that we've kind of gotten over the years since Get Out, say, where we're taking a really, really well-known idea of a concept of something, in that case, like racism, race relations, and trying to find what the horror is in that. I found that to be a very intriguing idea for a horror movie that I had yet seen. So.
Yeah. Very cool. And I guess I should throw it back to you, Laurent. What did you think of the film overall then?
I felt like the two lead actors in this give really, really strong, grounded, very delicate performances. And I was really, really drawn into the romance between the two of them. It was nice to see Mia Wasikowska back at a movie, because I've always been a fan, but it's nice to see her play, in this case, a villain, I guess. I felt like the horror elements in this were a little too muted for my taste, in terms of I saw that trailer and I thought that's going to be terrifying, and I didn't find this movie terrifying. I found it a little too sterile on the horror aspect of things, but I was so drawn in by the drama, with the horror elements in it, that I that's what kept me going throughout the whole process. I did think this was very haunting, very eerie, and very heartbreaking by the end, while not being maybe an altogether successful horror film, but I did think it was a strong film.
Yeah, very good. Matt, what did you think of Leviticus?
Yeah, so it's funny. I saw it at Sundance, and it was the scariest of the Midnighters, which is a commentary on both, I think, the movie itself, but also the Sundance lineup for the Midnighters itself. I think that the Midnighters were good, but Leviticus stood out because everything I was seeing there, this was the one that kind of punched us the hardest. So I think my take on it being a decent horror movie is a little blurred by the comparison it's making. But no, I was positive on this because the simplest way of calling it just queer It Follows is correct. That's what it is. It is the It Follows template for the idea of a conversion therapy demon, which is great. It is a perfect concept. It is fantastic what it's doing. I love the way that the movie it's a commentary on being forced to confront your demons in the term of the religious context of the way that they see homosexuality, but in the same time it's about these, the whole horror of this movie is the victims that are plagued by the demon. Let's say they have to see the last thing that brought them happiness, like the person they love, the reason that they got caught being outed in their very conservative town. So having to either succumb to that killing them or running from it their entire lives is such a strong visual commentary on the idea of conversion therapy and all that stuff. But I do go back to the idea that it does seem familiar. It seems familiar in the sense that this is just the It Follows template. And Well, I think that movie and this other movie called It Lives Inside, about an Indian American girl who rejects her culture to fit in America in school, and she unleashes the same kind of like It Follows demon that follows her around. I think Leviticus and It Lives Inside are the two It Follows knockoffs that work the best, but I think they both do suffer from the idea that like you can't do much different in some of those scenarios. And the reason that this works is because of the performances. Like, holy shit, those performances of the two leads, where you get the romance, you get the drama, you get the passion that they have for each other. So they are able, I'll call it formulaic. They're able to take the formula that we know and rise above, because the way that they are able to navigate through this entire heartbreaking ordeal that is terrifying for them. Like, the movie itself may not be terrifying, but we understand the fear that they feel because they are able to project that 10 times past the screen. So for me, that's where Leviticus works. It works because the familiarity isn't a killer. It becomes the film's advantage. And you have a filmmaker who is a debut filmmaker very confidently giving us something that he is not afraid to be like, you might have seen some of this before, but you ain't seen it like I'm going to give it to you. So that's where I think Leviticus stands out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I like the It Follows comp is great. My main criticism of it actually is that it doesn't ever feel as big as It Follows. It's not, they're in the same town the whole time, and it doesn't necessarily take away from like the sort of tension that I feel going from scene to scene, but it does make you feel like that the scope feels a lot more intimate, which it is. But I kind of, with It Follows, they're like, where there's a bunch of us, there's a whole group of us, and we're all kind of working together to figure out how to overcome this. We're driving to different parts of the country. There's this sense of like camaraderie that I felt like was in size that we got in It Follows. And also just the It Follows demon ghost thing was able to do a lot of crazy stuff. It also shape shifted into multiple individuals, so there's more fun to be had there, whereas this was a lot quieter. It was a lot more intimate, smaller scale scope. They were all in the same town, and overall I don't think that's necessarily a detriment, but it did make me, I kind of kept waiting for the film to kick into another gear, and it never quite did that. However, the performances really are top shelf. The way that they are able to turn on a dime in a single scene was really moving. I'd be sitting here on the edge of tears, and then the next thing you know, just like Joe Bird's character, you're like immediately just like, you feel the fear, the visceral existential fear of like, oh my God, this thing I love is now about to strangle me to death. And all of that works really, really well. And I don't know, I think, I'm not following the category of, LGBTQIA, but I did grow up in a rather evangelical home. And there is this sort of, I think I want to kind of pick out a little more with the title. The film does a really good job of sort of exploring this thing you love that brings you joy is also a thing that is tormenting you. And, whether you buy it or not, it's always going to be this interior like monologue or dialogue you're having with yourself. Do I give into the temptation and feel that like satisfaction and fulfillment that allows me to feel like me? Or do I run away from it and just feel hollow and empty and sad? And I think the movie does an incredible job exploring that psychology and just how damaging and traumatizing that can be, especially, of course, for the queer community. But, I think it's a thing that we don't really see at least I haven't seen a whole lot of in horror films, like the psychology of like this, like you're ultra, I don't want to say it's very rigid. You must follow these rules. If you break these rules, you are going to hell, and you're pulling everyone around you down with you. Kind of, I don't know, that tension it was really interesting. Maybe some compelling drama to me. I don't feel like we see that super often. Again, I mentioned the Bible verse thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Does Leviticus actually get referenced in the movie directly at all? I didn't catch it if it did.
I don't think it does. I think it's implied. I think it's like, and I think it's because that is such a well-known verse that gets weaponized over and over and over again. And it's like, okay, they harp on these specific passages, but they don't, if you just read whether you're religious or not, but if you just read like a couple sentences down, you'll see like, okay, then here's a very common thing that a lot of people do that we don't ever criticize people doing. It's like, and so it's just kind of this like they've harped on it because it's something that they can try to control in a certain way. And what I think the film does really well, similarly what Get Out did for me with this concept of the sunken place, like creating a visual representation of what it's like to be inside the mind of an African American who feels unsafe in all white space, where it's like you revert to this space. Like clearly I haven't literally been floating around in this vacuous black hole, but that it definitely creates like an external representation of what it feels like on the inside. And I think that the movie did a really good job. And as a queer person, what it felt like to be like we're in Oklahoma. So, I mean, I'm in Oklahoma. So I'm in a blood red state, where, that's constantly under a magnifying glass, and not feeling safe in mixed company. Like I go to queer spaces because I know that queer and non-queer people will be in there and it's safe for everyone involved, versus I go to straight places and then I have to think about, like, wait, how much of myself can I, there's a sense of breathing, letting go in those spaces that I don't feel like I constantly can do, or just feel the safety to do so. And I think it does a great job of externalizing that queer desire, which comes naturally from me, and then making it into this monstrosity that is actually going to be harmful to you. And that, to me, is the messaging that these kind of religious, these kind of oppressive religious apparatus is kind of created for people like that in those spaces. And I think it does a good job of using that idea as a metaphor in this sense that I think will give some people somewhat of an understanding of it, who have, maybe never thought of it in that context, so.
I think the most horrific part of the entire movie is the scene where it's the conversion. Whatever you want to say, when the demon is assigned to the children who are queer, and they are now being marked by whatever entity you want to call it. And it is a town coming together in the wrong way. It is the idea of the community taking its own community, like its community turning in on itself, and the way that these children are writhing on the ground. And it's like it's one of those possession-esque kind of scenes where the kids are convulsing and they are being taken by a power, and just everyone's standing around and chanting, and it just being that idea of just, this is for the greater good, or it's for the betterment of everyone. Right, exactly. Like that is when the film is at its most effective. So like while the horror itself is just a lot of walk chase kind of scenes, whatever you want to call them, or the demon kind of popping out, and the idea of like, is Joe Bird talking to his lover, or is he talking to the demon version of his lover? Like that's where the horror is. I think the horrific elements are the way it's able to really like clue into that small town mentality and how small it really is, and how dangerous it can be. So like it's
removing the safety of it. Because I think that's what it is not having a safety net, particularly when you're vulnerable and you're in your youth and you feel all those things so intensely at that age. You're not, I'm much more able to navigate those type of things now, but I wasn't when I was 19 or 20, and so not feeling like you have anywhere to go to be open about that sort of thing. And in this case, like you said, having the person he loves, not knowing if you even have the freedom to, for a split second, feel comfortable with that person again. And especially when you're in public, it's like, okay, like don't give me eye contact, don't hold my hand, like be normal, like that kind of self-policing that you had to do for so long, like you just can't breathe, most of the time. So I think that it captures that really well, which is why I actually do like the small setting. I'm actually okay with that because I think that the isolation of that is deeply felt. I didn't grow up in a small town, but I think like the idea that you have nowhere to go, everyone knows everyone, you're kind of, you're stuck, there's nothing you can do. You can't escape this thing. You can't go off into the city and like be free for a weekend and come back. It's like there's eyes on you wherever you go. Someone at the diner might see you with this person, so you're never really going to feel like you're always going to be on your guard, so.
Well, Laurent, I think the thing you mentioned there too is I think the way that multiple characters in the movie weaponize their trust, right? Like, I mean, you have their kind of like mutual friend who's like, oh, I know a girl at this hospital who's had this sort of thing happen, shares that information, buys trust, and then later in the movie actually tries to get them like murdered outside the small town. And then on top of that, you've got Mia over here like, oh, I have to do this to you because I understand what happens to queer kids. So I need to get the gay, the queerness out of you so that you're safe for the future because I can't lose you. That sort of like super twisted like thought process, Matt, that you were sort of alluding to, infecting this entire town. Yeah, I think that pretty nails it pretty well. Yeah.
And to not be able to challenge any notion that comes your way and just going along with it, because no matter how horrific it is, even to witness, like just trusting like blindly that, that this horrible thing you're seeing happening is actually for the greater good. And that's a terrifying cult mentality that we kind of see translate in many different ways in our world, but especially in like religious communities. So I think it captures something real in that sense. And that's why I think for me, the dramatic aspect of this story works so well that I'm able to, I guess, give up the fact that I did also want to have like maybe a moment that I would say is super indelible that was like, that freaked me the hell out, versus it's just horrific in a very subtle sort of way, which, again, for a debut film, still a very, very, very strong effort. So.
Very good. Lots more we could talk about Leviticus. It sounds like we're all generally pretty positive on it. Matt Donato, what letter grade would you give Leviticus?
Yeah, so this one bumps up to that like B- territory for me. I think it's super confident. I think it's super well composed. I think the performances are fantastic. It does fall into a little bit of that repetition, and I think it falls into a little bit of the like familiarity working against you at sometimes. So that's where I do detract a little bit, but I can't deny, again, this has been a good year for filmmakers where I just watch their stuff and go, damn, like your future is so bright. And I think Adrian is another one of those examples where, he's not getting the same hype as a Kane Parsons or as a Curry Barker, but like he is right there because the chops that he showed technically as a director here. Yeah, no, huge, great future. Watch out for this one too.
Yeah. Well, not to mention, I mean, just this is a pretty hefty subject matter. The fact that you're able to kind of like take on such a hefty subject matter with all such nuance and consideration and confidence, I think really speaks to, yeah, man, whatever he does next is going to be really exciting. Laurent Chapman, what letter grade would you give Leviticus?
Yeah, I think the movie is quite quietly profound, and I think it's effective in its simplicity. And I think if I just watched it without any kind of preconceived notion about what I was getting ready to watch, I probably wouldn't be as critical about this one element. But I think that I do still think it's very strong, and I am eager to rewatch it with someone who hasn't seen it in particular. But I'd give it this a B. I think it's very solid, and I think that again the performances from the two leads really, really sold this in a really strong way.
All right, very cool. Well, I'm also going to give it a B-. I think it's really good. I think the thing it's really about, the meaningful ideas it's about related to, again, sort of like that the kind of gay conversion therapy demon type subject, I think is really strong material that alone I think makes it worth a watch for anyone who has any interest in sort of queer cinema, certainly, but even for horror cinema to consider. I wish it packed a little more of a punch, but it certainly, I think, again, strong outing from the directorial debut, like Matt said. So B-. I can't wait to see what we get next with this one. All right, well, let's move on to our final film today, the newest one, Evil Dead Bird.
Cheers to your perfect family.
According to IMDb, Evil Dead Burn is described as, after the loss of her husband, a woman seeks solace with her in-laws. As one by one they transform into deadites, she comes to discover that the vows she took in life survive even after death. It's a little bit, that's like slightly spoilery for an IMDb description. I gotta say, this is the 6th entry. Count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sixth entry in the 45-year-old Evil Dead franchise. This is the second feature from writer-director Sebastian Vanchik, following his 2023 debut, Infested. And this film opened in theaters on July 10th, so this past weekend. It carries a production budget of $20 million and opened to, I think the estimate's around $15 million domestically. That is significantly below both of its recent predecessors, and also came in under projections considerably. For context, Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead in 2013 opened to $25.8 million. And its opening weekend, and Lee Cronin's Evil Dead Rise debuted at 24.5 in its ultimate weekend, and both of those legged out to have pretty healthy box office returns. So this is a notable step down in terms of box office success. Now, before we talk about Evil Dead Burn specifically, I thought it might be fun. We're all big fans of this franchise on this podcast. I thought it might be good just to talk about, hey, like, what is it about Evil Dead that we really like so much? And Matt, I'll start with you. Like, where do you land on sort of that campy, silly versus like brutal violence Evil Dead?
Well, I mean, it goes hand in hand. I think the conversation has kind of gotten a little out of control online of the Evil Dead Burn is too mean, where the rest of the franchise is jokey and fun. Like, somebody used the shenanigans quote from Super Troopers to be like, the Evil Dead franchise's shenanigans are like cheeky and clean, while like Evil Dead Burn shenanigans are cruel and all this stuff. And like, that's incorrect. I mean, we're talking about a fucking franchise that starts with tree rape. Like, not to be graphic, but like, that is where the franchise starts. That's up here. So I do agree, because I am one of the people that does think Evil Dead Burn got too lost in trying to be too mean to let the other elements get lost in it, where I agree. One of my things here is like, I love Bruce Campbell, just the work he does in Evil Dead and the physical comedy he brings to it is what became popular. I understand that is where Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and Ash vs. the Evil Dead all thrive. It's in Bruce Campbell doing this because that's his personality. That's just who he is as a person. So like, that is what shines through. You get the Three Stooges that Sam Raimi loves so much, but you also get like the graphic nastiness of this franchise. It never sacrificed any bit of the brutality and the evil of Evil Dead in letting Bruce Campbell shine. But then you get to Fede Alvarez doing the remake, which sacrilegiously is my favorite of the franchise, apparently. But like, I think that is a near perfect horror movie, top to bottom. Jane Levy is my favorite Deadite performance in the entire franchise. And yet that movie still does understand to me that you do have to have some of the real dark, nasty humor in there. Lou Taylor Pucci is doing the comedic relief. Jane Levy as Deadite Mia is so evil and yet like jesterly in the right ways. And I think Evil Dead Rise, Lee Cronin nails that balance too. Hits you right in the face so many times. And yet I was laughing heartily throughout Evil Dead Rise. Burn, where it sits with the franchise, and we'll get into like the review of it, but like, I do think Burn does align most with Evil Dead 2013. It is that pitch black nastiness, but I just don't want people to forget that like the entire franchise has been this. I think Burn does fit in the franchise. I don't think it's black sheep. I just think it gets lost a little bit in doing what it is. So it's like, my overall commentary is there is no bad Evil Dead movie. I think that this is one of the most consistent horror franchises out there in terms of quality, and that it's just varying levels of how much I like them. So I think that right there is the idea of like, Evil Dead is my franchise in a way. Like Child's Play is my forever favorite slasher franchise, but Evil Dead, it will always be in my argument of the most consistent, and like the thread is there, and it's set up in the right way where it can keep going. So like, Evil Dead's great, but it is always a mean and evil franchise. This isn't new to the franchise. Like, it's always been that, and that's why it's good.
Yeah. I mean, let's not forget, Sam Raimi, the comedy in the first movie kind of happened on accident a little bit. Like, it was sort of like they were funny kind of on accident, or because they didn't have the resources to be as gory as they wanted to be. So it's always, I think to your point, Matt, like baked into the identity, at least the identity that Sam Raimi initially intended in that first film. LeBron Chapman, where do you come down on sort of the two Evil Deads, jokey versus horror?
I have had a long evolution with this franchise, because I was somebody who in 2013 was like, what the hell is this? This is not my Evil Dead. What is going on? This is way too like I'm fine with brutality, I'm fine with gore, I'm fine with, but for me it was like it was missing the what I came to see, which I was expecting to see, was more of that silliness, if you will, like you said, instead of the extremity that we were getting pretty early on. But I've since revisited multiple times and have been told you are wrong. And I went back and rewatched it. Like I said, I've probably seen it 8 or 9 times now in Halloween rotations. But and I realized that I can separate these two things in my mind, where I can enjoy this thing for what it is and this thing for what it is. And that's basically where I land with it, is that I like both of these. And I don't know, is there a connective tissue between all 6, or is there a separation completely between the Bruce Campbell and the outside of just the general? Okay.
I don't know.
I mean, the answer is no. The answer actually is no. They are all connected. I am holding my breath to see how it all comes together.
How it all comes together. Okay.
So far, we've been a little. Are we going to Texas Chainsaw ourselves? Are we going to Michael Myers?
Yeah, exactly. At some point, maybe there's going to be like a definitive, like, aha, they're all together. But yes, in my mind, I've separated them as different experiences, and I think that I like both of them in their own respects. But sometimes there is a little bit of, beforehand, like, like that whole, like, this feels so far this direction. Like if you're just doing like the meters of like brutality, extremity, comedy. You guys saw what was the horror movie with Sophie Thatcher? And she's like a robot or
A companion.
Yeah. So like, how they're doing like the racial intelligence 20% and sexiness up to 105. That's what it felt like. Somebody was moving the nodules there, just a little bit with it. But I've come around to really enjoying these new iterations quite a bit. Yeah, as long as I just see them as different experiences. I guess I would make the comparison to old Batman, like to Chris Nolan Batman. There's a universe where I like the campy silliness of the Joel Schumacher, like all these, like, even though they're terrible, like I enjoy that. And then I also enjoy Chris Nolan's like super serious take on Batman. Like I can enjoy both of them, but I just separate them in my head about what they are, so.
Listen, guys, is there really such a thing as bad pizza? I mean, like, yeah, like there's even like vegan pizza. It's not my favorite, but I still eat it. I'm like, damn, pizza's pretty good. Like, listen, I tend to gravitate more towards the campiness. I enjoy it a lot, but I think there is especially the older I've gotten, and maybe this just says more about me as an individual, the graphic violence has gotten funnier. Because I remember when I saw Evil Dead 2013, I was not crazy about it, but when I revisited a couple of years ago, I was like, this is way funnier than I remember. And it's just because the horror or the comedy is so dark and bleak, but like, I don't know, I think it's kind of hilarious now. I think that of the newer iterations, the Evil Dead Rise probably hit the best balance between like, hey, we're going to be silly. We know that the audience is here for silly and goofy, but also you're going to get so much gore thrown in your face. So I guess if I was going to pick like my favorite mixture, it would be, Evil Dead Rise. But I mean, Evil Dead 2 is a masterpiece. And then Army of Darkness is doing like a dark fantasy thing. Like all of them are great. Yeah, they're like, so I like some of the Batman movies I don't like. But, I like that there's variety. And I think it speaks to sort of like the strength of the premise. There's so much flexibility in what you can do in an Evil Dead movie. And I think that Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell both, have been really smart stewards of the franchise by saying, hey, yeah, we're going to make the comedy. You've got the first movie, which is what it was. And then the second and third one lean more into the jokiness while also having a lot of intensely gory sequences in it. We're going to have Ash versus Evil Dead that's going to lean into the comedy. And then we're going to create this super bleak version of this with this new film. So, I mean, I like that we have options. I'm a fan of all of it. I do tend to lean more towards a good balance between the super graphic and the comedy myself, but they're all pretty great. Evil Dead Burn, though. Yes, Matt, dubbed the meanest one in the franchise. What did you guys think of Evil Dead Burn? And Lauren, I'll throw it to you first.
Man, I mean, 6 entries in, and we are still coming up with very deranged and inventive ways to mutilate the human body. And you know what? I didn't think there was anything else. I mean, we just got a really great Final Destination Bloodlines, recently. And I'm like, how have we not killed different people? Well, they found some very creative ways to do that here. And I was, yeah, I mean, this was one that I definitely squirmed quite a bit. And I like extreme violence. Let's be clear. Like, I mean, and I'll watch the bleakest of bleakest things. But there were certain degrees of brutality in this that I was just like, man, whoever dreamed that up. I think this works really, really well on a technical level. I think it's really well staged and choreographed. I mean, it is like, it pretty much hits the ground running. And I think once the body slamming and the skin laceration things start happening, it's like it's a ride all the way till the end. I think it sacrifices some of the characterization, which I know is not why people go to these movies. So let's, like, oh, maybe it is. Because like you said, Bruce Campbell was kind of like an iconic character in that space. But it's like that is the element of this that I wish we had devoted. Because I even think in Evil Dead Rise, we get a little bit more characterization with, that family dynamic there than we do here. Because it pretty much, like, while it's dealing with trauma and it's dealing with like a cycle of abuse within this family, we don't spend enough time with them to really like have that to have much of an emotional impact for me. So I enjoyed this for the most part, though, as a ride, as just really relentless kind of muscular exercise in chaos, and it's one of those movies where I say it does what it says on the box, like this is this what you want? This lady screaming in agony with flames behind her. That's what you're going to get. And it delivers on that front. So I think that I can't knock it too much, because it definitely is serving what it says it's going to.
Yeah, literally, Evil Dead Burn. There is literally a consistent motif of things on fire. So 2026 in a nutshell. Matt Donato, what did you think of Evil Dead Burn?
Yeah, I'm aligned definitely with Laurent here, and one of the things that did stick out to me is where in most of the Evil Dead movies, I feel like there is a foundation built where the characters are more than just deadite fodder. They're more than just people that I know are here to die. And this is really, I do think, the first time in the franchise where I didn't feel that connection to a lot of the establishment that was going on. We're thrown into what feels like the end of an act one that gets right to a terrible event. And you understand completely like that so Alice, like the lead in the film, Suhail Yaqub plays her, and like we understand that she's dealing with trauma from the way that her partner is outwardly abusive in that first scene. But the way that the film doesn't give you anything else and just gets you right into this idea where like the movie starts with a horrific death and it brings a family together, and you understand the family isn't on great terms, but it's just kind of thrown in. It's just kind of, hey, we need a reason to put a bunch of people in a house and it's going to go poorly. And there is so much here that is Sebastian pushing boundaries. I'll say that because this movie is like, it's the new French Extremity version of an Evil Dead movie.
Yes.
Sebastian is a French filmmaker, and you can see where he is pulling from directly. And, if you've seen Infested or Vermin, as it's titled overseas, if you've seen his debut, it's, again, breakneck. It has so much energy. It is Attack the Block meets Arachnophobia in the best way. It's so good. So I was so excited to hear him announce for an Evil Dead movie because I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's got he's got the juice. He has the propulsive energy to really sell an Evil Dead movie. And I was right, because this movie is balls to the wall. Like, it just goes for it. Once the horror stops, it doesn't stop. But in doing so, I think he gets lost because there are elements here that I can tell are meant to be jokes, and they just don't land for me because the tone itself does not really permit that. And the tone itself is so dark in a way that is overtaking, and you can't really get around that. So for me, while the elements are there and the gore is great and it's so much practical and the little bit of CG that's there has to happen because it's just the only way they can do things. I will say, I think my one point I'll use, and listen, I am not the dog has to survive in every movie. I think a dog death can happen as long as it serves the story in a correct way. I am okay with it. But any movie that uses a dog death early on to kind of show you, hey, this is how extreme we're gonna get. That's where you lose me a little bit. And don't get me wrong, it does give us the chance to have a dogite, which is kind of awesome. Like fantastic. But I don't know, I felt that a little bit. I felt like that was a little bit of a like, hold on to your butts because you ain't seen an Evil Dead movie like this. And in doing so, I think it lost a little bit of the plot. That's where I struggle with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you identified a lot of things that were struggles for me too. On the dog point, I went and saw this one on my own, and I got back home, and my wife, who does like the original 3, has not seen the the newer ones for reasons. She's game for like 98% of what I make her watch. And she's into it. There's like, she saw the trailer, she's like, nah. And then the second, she also her whole thing, the second a dog goes, she's like, I walked in, I said, nope, you're never watching this. I'm not even going to pitch it to you on any context. There's a dog, and we do get a deadite dog, and it is kind of awesome, but it's such a mean scene. Yeah. I think you guys, about the two things you honed in on there that struggles for me. Number one, yes, Matt, I feel like we needed, like, I don't know about a whole act, but we needed more foundational scenes that showed the chemistry of this group in a somewhat more relatable or positive setting to understand, yes, this family we meet them when they're at their lowest point, right? And it would have been nice to have known what they were in a different normal context, even if it's an unhealthy context. Like, what was the dynamic like usually? What were the human elements that I can kind of plug into? Because by the time we get to the funeral, it's like, oh, we're all sad, and now all our grievances are just going to come up at this one dinner, and then it's all going to hit the fan. And I really felt like, in some ways, this is a more ambitious Evil Dead because it's trying to tackle an entire family unit, because it's actually trying to talk about the nature of abusive relationships that happen both, in-house when a single relationship, but also within a family. Those are some pretty big ideas for an Evil Dead movie. And unfortunately, I just don't think that it invests enough time. It's too focused on getting to the thrill ride to really to do the legwork to get me to feel meaningfully invested in the characters of the family. Now, that said, once this thing gets going, yes, we lose a dog, and then it's off to the races. It hits 11 within like 20 minutes, and it doesn't ever let up. And I, for one, was so into it. I had a great time. It's so mean. And even though I don't think it has the sense of humor that I would have liked to get closer to the Evil Dead Rise kind of more blend, I did think the camera work was very playful in this movie. And that was where I kind of got a lot of... you mentioned Final Destination Bloodline Thrawn. I got a lot of those, like, oh, they're doing the thing where they know what we're thinking, but instead of being like textual about it, it's all in the camera work and the editing choices they make, and I had a lot of fun with that. Yeah, it's not a very funny movie otherwise. It's mean. People get ground up in the worst imaginable ways possible. I mean, even the cold open was just with the fishing line. Holy shit, that was
Boiling Lake is pretty awesome. Like, that was pretty. That's something I have not seen yet. I was like, that's awesome. That's a clever way to play into the title and the ongoing idea of fire and burning and whatever that I wouldn't have dreamed up. That was really cool.
Well, when he's holding his buddy, he's like, "I got you, man. I got you."
Yeah.
Just it really.
Like, no, you don't, man. No. you got half of them. And I will say the one element of humor that I did get, it's punctuated in a few moments, is the grandma. The grandma got a lot of, I mean, admittedly, pretty racist lines, but but they're articulated in a certain way where, like, you can't help but laugh. Like, her oblivion, to all what's happening around her until she becomes one herself. That was a lot of fun, I felt like, and that's where I got a little bit of the LOL, but that is so few and far between in between the extremities. But I do think that, as you said, Matt, like, this movie needed an act one, like a full act one, maybe. And then we could got to all of the, the mad dash, chaos that comes after. Because I do think that, and again, it doesn't have to be an hour long act one. It could have, we could be talking about another additional 15, 20 minutes maybe of just establishing who these characters are, this dynamic is. Because I do feel like pretty soon, like, yep, I hate her boyfriend or her husband or whoever it was, and then immediately he's dead. So it's like, well, I'm already satisfied because I'm glad he's gone, that sort of thing, so. I feel like a little breathing room there at the front would have made the themes that it's trying to explore pop a little bit more and not feel like they were just kind of lost in the, the swirling camera work, which was really good, by the way.
We need more time to understand why these characters make the choices they do, I think is the way that I say it. Like we understand that Joseph is timid, but we don't have a full understanding of how Joseph could be the kind of person that leaves his partner to die and just runs away.
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
something that is so monumental and something that is such a huge decision for someone to make. There's just not the context to really build to be like, all right, did you earn being that much of a coward? Like, I don't know. You are clearly you did that. That's a surprising thing to happen, but just the character development isn't there for me to understand how you could be that person. You just are. And it's like, okay, it makes sense in the context of the scene, but it just didn't have that same oomph where like other characters, in other Evil Dead movies, when they get turned or when they pass, like it just means so much more because I cared about them so much more. And Joseph to me is the example of like, all right, that's a heartbreaking scene, but the building blocks just weren't there to get there for me.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
It should have felt like a betrayal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when you're watching, you're like, well, okay. And the movie does a lot of telling. Obviously we do in that scene see his cowardice in play, but there's a lot of telling you, oh, this is the kind of guy you are. You don't have a spine, and you know what I mean. And there's just I would have liked just a little more, maybe just some normal like casual scenes. Like maybe the guy can't speak up at dinner to like correct his food order. I don't know, something dumb like that. But you know what I mean? Just like more human interactions that are relatable. So that way, whenever you're like, oh, is he gonna grow a spine in this moment or not? It just feels like a foregone conclusion by the time we get there. Did you guys find anything particularly insightful about what it was saying about the cycles of abuse in the movie? Because I did think that was a pretty prevalent theme. I didn't really think it paid off super well, but I don't know. What did you guys think about that?
I feel like the idea that it can manifest in really unsavory ways, even for the best people, when unchecked and because obviously she taps into a very visceral, the lead character taps into a very visceral side of herself that maybe she otherwise wasn't, showing with her boyfriend, you know what I mean? Like, and so it brings out in that sense, in a positive way, as a self-defense mechanism, but in terms of the way that operates in day-to-day life, can manifest in very toxic ways, and I felt like that it played to that dynamic really well. And similarly to the family dynamic too, just a lot of unchecked trauma there with all of them. So.
And I think it's really, it's the best when it's kind of doing the family stuff too. Like those scenes that hit hardest is when Alice is like looking at, the family she would have been in if her partner was still alive. And, you have mom and dad just being like, my darling of a son, like my son who could do no wrong, and having no idea of like the monstrous shit he did. And that's, I think, where it hits hardest, because you're talking about trauma on so many levels, and yet you are stuck in a room with people who refuse to believe you, just based on the mask, I think, of family and stuff like that. This idea of bloodlines being so thick, and this idea of like, my baby boy couldn't do that. That couldn't be him. It couldn't be that guy. That prevailing theme of, oh, he's such a nice boy or whatever. That we're right back into that conversation. So I think that is when it is strongest, when Alice is just struggling because she knows it's not worth it even at times. Like, she doesn't want to even do it. It's just, I want to get out of here. Great. You have this image of your boy. I have the reality, and I just need to get out of here. And that turning into the survival scenario of literally having to escape the family, it definitely plays in the right way.
Yeah.
But one of the sickly humorous moments that does kind of sneak its way into there, I think, is like when the mom is making out with deadite daddy. In the windowsill. I was like, wait a minute now, where we, that's a moment where I'm like, I feel like they're being cheeky in this moment. It's gross, but that's definitely an element, like what they're trying. And it's jet black because it's disgusting, but also clearly at that moment she has not been turned. And so it's a very much like okay, so you just made out with, his open cheek hole, and so that was something that was definitely like, yikes, for me. But that definitely
it's so strange because, like, I'm such a horror comedy guy, and yet I was stone faced this whole movie, and I liked it, but it was just that thing of like, you're 100%, like those scenes are there where I can recognize I should be laughing. There's the denture scene. There's so many little blips here and there that I know I should be laughing at, and yet it is just the approach of the entire film, and I couldn't get out of the other mentality. I was so stuck just in the like sensory overload maybe of the jet blackness, and so like I was sitting there just acknowledging like this is a rad scene, but I still was just like that.
Yeah, no, it's a tough gear to shift, and the way and the delivery of the lines too, because she's like, "You haven't kissed me like that in years," and it is kind of funny. But there's again, it's like whereas Obsession earlier, for example, I thought it was able to find a lot of comedy, like really just authentic, genuine like the balance was better, so I felt comfortable laughing at this uncomfortable thing. Versus in this movie, I'm like, am I supposed to be laughing at this thing? I think they want me to laugh at it, but I'm not really sure because I feel like the dad is also probably abusive. So that makes this whole scene feel icky in that way. I don't know. So I feel that too. The comedy did not land. Definitely not as well as like I'd say the last couple of films.
The tone is so oppressive, like there's just, it's this. And so if they tried to throw some humorous elements within that, it's just the temperature in the room is already like, it's through the roof. So, definitely like even when they're trying to add like a lightness or a levity there, it gets singed up really quickly because that's just it. Everything else is just so present, throughout. So.
Well, man, there's a lot we can unpack here. So many gory deaths. I have to say, I just should give the film kudos to the number of truly creative gore-tastic deaths is really unmatched. I think. Maybe a question I asked you guys. You were sort of joking. Laurent, you were asking the question earlier. Are these all connected in the same universe? And up until this movie, I was like, no, not really. I mean, like, I'm sure there's fans on the internet who have come up with some way to thread this all together. But my mind, these are all sort of like outside of the first three that are even those three are very loosely connected. Right. I don't really see a through line in this series until we watch this film and we get the post-credit stinger, which sort of ties this back into, at the very least, the previous film, Evil Dead Rise. So I guess the question I have for you guys, what do you guys think about how this film is connecting to those previous installments? Matt, I'll throw it to you first.
Well, yeah, you guys caught that Bruce Campbell's in Burn, right?
I didn't.
I did not. I missed that.
Twice.
Okay.
There is the picture that Alice crumples up, or I forget if it's Alice. There is a picture that is crumpled up that is confirmed Bruce Campbell, and that is supposed to suggest. Here's where I get lost. Perry Nemiroff did the interview with Sebastian, and like she went in, it was like, listen, I caught Bruce's voice and I caught Bruce in the pictures. So like apparently he's in the crumpled picture, and then he's on another picture that when you walk down the staircase, that is Bruce Campbell in one of the portraits.
Okay.
I don't understand what that is suggesting beyond he's the grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
That's the insinuation it's making.
Yeah.
And yet there is no confirmation ever. There is no ever tie into that. And that also seems wonky to me in the sense that they were saying the guy is Benjamin Price is the grandfather who was obsessed with the book and was the one who was writing in all the scribbles in the notebook and stuff. So like, did he change his name? Why is that there? How is that happening? You also have at the end of Evil Dead 2013, Bruce says to Jane Levy's character, get in. So like that post-credit stinger is there. And then we get to what you're referencing at the end of Evil Dead Burn. And Alyssa Sutherland is back as mommy now. How is she able to get back up from her, what I thought was decimated form?
Seemed pretty decimated.
Seemed pretty decimated. So, I mean, I'm taking all these in step. And that's why I kind of say before, it's feeling a little Texas Chainsaw-y. It's feeling a little like Halloween-y, where Evil Dead didn't have to. I understand when you have the singular killer, it becomes hard of like, how do you keep resurrecting a Michael Myers, or how do you keep this going? There is a one killer deal here. So how do you do this? Evil Dead, it's the book, and now books. I like that was introduced too by the last two movies. Like there are now at least 3 books out there in the world and stuff. So like that could have been enough to be the impetus to do more movies. Like, oh, a new group found a new book, or a new group found another, and so you can just use an Necronomicon. But in bringing back Alyssa Sutherland, I am not confused, because Cheryl came back to it in other iterations of the past stuff. So like we have had a character return from Deadite form, and yet this one seems a little bit too much. That was such an open and shut thing. That was such a you're gone and now you're back, and now you're back in a prominent way because you just murder a child in a post-credit scene. It's like, go for it. Don't get me wrong. I don't hate that part of it.
It was her line at the end. It's a very prominent, like, I'm back sort of.
Something like, I do forget exactly what it was, but yeah, it's running along those lines. So everyone is now saying like a team up versus movie some now. Like we can go back and like maybe Jane's back in a future movie, and maybe like it's got to be the good versus the evil and all these stuff. So I don't know. It didn't have to, and I don't know how to feel about it, because it could be the coolest thing ever, and we just don't know yet. But it seems like an overcomplication that we didn't need.
That's how I feel. I feel like it's I had, oh, that's cool, and then immediately was like, wait, like what are we going to do with that sort of thing? So there's a little bit of trepidation there. So I'm wondering, for me more so, it's like I'm excited at the prospect, but nervous at the, is this going to be the thing that undoes the franchise, where all of a sudden we go and we start, it starts becoming a little too, we had by my account 6 perfect Scream movies, and then 7 came, and so at some point there's a thing that just undoes it, and it's just inevitable. With no matter how strong the franchise is, they're going to find something. So I'm not saying that's what this is going to be, but it does give me a little bit of pause, where I'm like, I hope they have a good idea with this, and they're not just trying to keep these movies going, and not actually going to do something interesting with this character returning. So.
You guys are warmer than me. I'm pretty skeptical about this. We have lived through the MCU and the DCEU and now the DCU, and I know there's comic book movies, but we've lived through a decade and a half of, hey guys, let's make interconnected cinematic universes. And what was beautiful about Evil Dead is the connections are there if you really want to dig for them. But like, you just even mentioned the Bruce Campbell thing, Matt. That's cool, but in my brain, I'm like, oh, that's a fun Easter egg. I don't read into these movies in that way. I just really like for these movies to take me on a ride. Usually have some cool ideas, like subtextually. I really have no desire to see them connect at all. I mean, that said, so I'm skeptical if they do. And I think we've got another Evil Dead movie coming out in 2 years. It's already been shot, I think. So they're just kind of sitting on it. So, hey, I'm open-minded. Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, again, as I said earlier, have been great stewards. And if there's a really great, strong idea to make it fun, and I do trust them more than most filmmakers, then I say let's go for it. But I will say, whenever we got the post-credit stinger, yes, kill the little girl. But I was like, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit of oh, we're going to try to retroactively Spectre this thing, and be like, these were connected the whole time over the last 45 years. It feels a bit of a risk to me, but I'll wait and see. I do trust Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, and I do think there's probably something more going on than what seems obvious. Yeah. So, well, with all that said, what letter grade are we going to give Evil Dead Burn? And Laurent Chapman, I'll throw it to you first.
For the sheer ride of it, I'm going to give it a B. I think it's still probably my least favorite of the new iterations that they have, but I still think it's a really solid, good time, So I'm going to give it a B for the sheer craftsmanship and just wild, chaotic, kinetic camera work, brutality, guts. Everything is on display here. And that, for me, that makes this more rewatchable for me. So I had a good time despite its shortcomings.
Okay, very good. Matt Donato, what letter grade would you give Evil Dead Burn?
Yeah, style over substance here, but it's my kind of style over substance in a way that, if you're gonna go all in on the gore, do it in a franchise like Evil Dead, and they're the ones that deliver. So I think I'm gonna stick with a B. I was between B and B minus, but I think B is where I am on a pure fun aspect.
I'm going to give this a B plus myself. And I have to say a little bit of bias. I saw this with an incredibly engaged audience, and that it bumped it from a B to a B plus. Just it's the film festival energy, when you're in a movie and everyone who's in the room really wants to be in the room, and you just kind of have that shared synergy in terms of reactions. So the theatrical going experience bumped it up by half a point for me. So it's a B movie, but if you can catch it, if you can find the ideal, I don't know, late night Saturday crowd or a really large group of friends to see it with, I would highly recommend it if you're an Evil Dead fan. But yeah, B plus, but only for the truest of the gore horror hounds would I recommend this to, because otherwise this is not for the faint of heart. Listeners, if you've seen any of these films, what did you think of those? You can comment below our video. Let us know that way. You can send us an email at thecinematropis@gmail.com or hit us up on our Instagram page at thecinematropis. Matt Donato, hey man, thanks for taking some time out of your Sunday, taking a couple hours to talk about all the really cool things happening in horror this year. It's great catching up with you. Where can people follow you and all the great things you're doing on the internet?
Yeah, you can follow me at Donatobomb, DONATOBOMB. And that is going to be Blue Sky. That's going to be Letterboxd. And that is going to be Instagram mostly. And as we talk about horror, we're getting to, I know it's midsummer, so I'm still trying to enjoy the end of my summer, but we got festival season coming up soon, and I am about to hit every horror goddamn festival out there. So follow me, and you'll have plenty of reviews from all the top horror fests.
Very good. Yeah, catch Matt. He's a great follow. Honestly, you're the one, you keep me up to speed on the stuff to look out for, whether at a follow-up festival or this, early sneak peeks. So good stuff there. Laurent Chapman, where can people follow you online?
They can also follow me on Letterboxd at black_Cine_man. You can also follow me at thecinematropis.com for more podcasts here. Also, I have a review column with Cinematropolis called Real Insights with Laurent Chapman. And if you like print media, then I'm also writing for the Oklahoma Gazette in Oklahoma City. So
let's go print media, still fighting to survive. I love physical media. Yes, I do.
All 5 people that read my column, listen, I got nothing but love for you.
Laurent, I don't live in Oklahoma City anymore, but I'm going to have to buy, when I'm in town, I'm going to have to get one of them and just cut it out, like the clipping, and put it on my
refrigerator or frame it, do something like, my mom doesn't even do this, but if you do it, I'll feel validated,
Good stuff. Long live physical media. Take that, Sony. They'll go for there. You can follow me on all the channels at C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk, Letterboxd, Instagram, or just head to cinematropis.com. More thoughtful conversations like this. We've got here in next week, actually, our review of the long awaited The Odyssey. That's certainly a big one. And, if you stick around, you subscribe, to YouTube or podcast players. Laurent and I also have a bonus episode. One of our drunk episodes. We're going to be reviewing Moana 2026 because we just need to talk about Disney and what the hell is going on, but we cannot do so without being slightly inebriated. So you can subscribe to the podcast for that. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll catch you again next week when we review The Odyssey.